Okay, welcome. Thank you so much for making time, showing up. We're at the Combine. Most people know that. Maybe you guys don't know that. And we're doing an episode of Labnotes. Labnotes in general started many, many years ago. They've evolved to really creative conversations with creative people. We try to directly or indirectly connect it to our worlds. So Jenny, we're 6 different creative agencies work out of here.
Right.
And you guys are from Sheridan? Amazing. So lots of different creative people. And I think the plan is really go through your story, talk about your rise, making music.
And my inevitable fall.
It's coming. This is the precipice of it here. And then also just want to get into like the businesses you've started and writing songs, creativity in general. But also for context, so I've known Jenny 20, 25 years? I don't know.
I would think 26 years probably, because I was hanging around with Joey before we were a couple. We were friends.
Gotcha.
And so that's my husband's family. And so Max's family and the Wrights, the Sakas and the Wrights, were next door neighbors and are great, close family friends. So as soon as I started coming around to the Wright house, I was getting to know the Sakas as well. And then Joey and I have been together since 2000, so that's already 24.5 years.
Yeah, my first memory of you, my family and your in-laws would have Christmas every year, and they would sing. They'd pull out sheet or like lyrics, and we'd sing. And it
Christmas
took
carols, yeah.
Christmas carols, yeah. And it took me from like age when I was born till like almost 20 to have the confidence to sing in that group. And then you showed up, professional singer, and I was like, oh my God.
Those are always in the absolute worst key, though. Do you ever notice that? Anyone who sings, you try to sing those carols, and it's always like exactly wrong for every single voice in the room somehow. But so it's kind of sweet about it, I guess.
I missed something here. Sorry. Gotta give me a second. It's not gonna work. Damn, my notes. I don't have my notes. Sorry. I'll just do this. One thing I did want to tell you before we start, behind that door, I don't know if I ever told you this story. Behind that what? Behind that door,
Yeah.
Everyone here might know, there's a baby grand piano.
Ooh.
Does everyone know that? You walk by it all the time. 6 years ago, we had an art show here for Matt Barnes, photographer. We rolled it in. We had to disassemble the handrail over there, rolled in the baby grand, and your brother played music all night at the show.
Jesse.
Yeah.
Nice.
It was so good. So that was her brother. A bunch of you probably might have come to that party and seen it. So yeah, I mean, you grew up, your brother's musician, your parents musicians, uncles. Like, what was it like for you growing up in a musical family, day one? Side note, Wikipedia, can I say I'll just say, birth date for Jenny Whiteley, 1971. Then it says years active, 1975 to present.
Yeah.
So when you were 4, you were an active musician.
Yeah. Well, he really slacked off the first 4 years, but So what happened there? So my dad, Chris Whiteley, and his brother Ken Whiteley were folk musicians and started a band in the '60s called the Original Sloth Band with another fella. So the 3 of them and. As a result, they were working musicians. They played lots of festivals. They were quite popular. They backed Leon Redbone. They were on Saturday Night Live. They had a pretty cool career. And then this whole sort of children's music boom started happening in the late 70s, early 80s. So that was Sharon Lois and Bram Raffi, Fred Penner eventually a little later. He's a little later to the mix. But yes, so there was just this era where people were really interested in presenting music to children that wasn't just kind of happy, the usual. I think probably Sesame Street and people like treating children with a little more respect probably had a lot to do with that. So there's this big children's music explosion that happened around that time. My Uncle Ken ended up producing Raffi's first 5 records. So he produced those in Hamilton, and those were actually recorded at the Lanois Brothers studio. So my brother and I, as little kids, ended up being recruited to play on Raffi's second and third record. So I'm on More Singable Songs and Baby Beluga. And
Does everyone know Rafi?
Some people of a certain age are very impressed by that. What's that? You currently listen to it. Do you have kids? Oh man, it would be funny if you didn't though. But even if you didn't, actually, that's the thing. That music's pretty darn good. So, yeah, like that's something, you know, that I've mentioned before is like I can do whatever I do in my own career, but as soon as someone of a certain age finds out that I'm Willoughby Wallaby Wenny, it's like game over. It's like their favorite thing they've ever heard.
So, sorry, you're saying that he literally mentions you in a song.
Willoughby Wallaby Woo. You know that one?
That's
An
you.
elephant sat
Oh my
on
God.
you. And then there's Willoughby Wallaby Wenny. That's me. Willoughby Wallaby Wen, my Uncle Ken. Yeah, we're all on there.
That's crazy. I've known you for this long. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I mean, I knew you were associated with Rafi, but that's crazy.
Yeah.
So what was it like growing up in that environment? Was it just normal? Or that or you knew it was...
It was normal. I knew it was special. Like I was allowed to ask a couple of friends, you know, would you want to come and do like sing on this record? So it was, you know, I knew it was exciting because it was really cool. Immediately I loved being in the studio. I loved the vibe in the studio. There was free video or like actually pinball games, I think in those days, like free pinball. You know, we got at the end of the day, we'd get like a huge, remember they had those like huge cookies that were like a pizza, but it was a cookie and they'd write on it, thanks kids. And it just seemed pretty cool. So yeah, I was hooked pretty much from the first record, and they also gave me a singing solo, so that was pretty awesome for me, because I think I was pretty much a born entertainer. I saw it, and I was like, yeah, that makes sense to me. I think I want to be on stage. I have no idea why. I mean, I did see people in my family and a lot of people I know on stage, but not everybody has that. I think I was just lucky that I kind of wanted to do that anyway, you know, so the combination of that, the nature-nurture thing really worked out.
Yeah, I want to stay on your upbringing, but do you think you had that performer bug in you. Do you think that can also be learned or taught? Or is it more natural?
I think it can be definitely taught and learned, but I think that the thing sometimes it's hard to overcome, for lack of a better term, like imposter syndrome if you don't come at it from a place where it's sort of what you're naturally inclined to do. Like I just feel like that's who I am. So I never think to myself, I'm not meant to be here. I'm not the right person for the job or whatever. If it's an appropriate fit, obviously. But so I could see that would be harder if it was something you were just working at with no, like if you're sort of working against your nature, your natural proclivity, it could be challenging in that way. I could see that for sure. Yeah.
Gotcha. And then, so back to being a musical kid, then you were in a band, like separate from helping out Rafi, sidekick.
Yeah, we never toured with Rafi. We just did those 2 records. But then, so then my dad and my uncle, as I say, there was like tons of work there was Mariposa in the schools, like the Library Association of Canada would like put on shows for kids. There was just tons and tons of work and grant money and all this stuff suddenly available for kids music. So my dad and my uncle were like, we should just so they were basically playing jug band music, which is pretty easy if you think about it to like kind of go from playing for grown-ups into playing for kids, because jug band music uses homemade instruments like washboards and spoons and wash tubs, and there's lots of different instruments, harmonica, trumpet, guitar. So they decided to make a kids record, and they called it Chris and Ken Whiteley and the Junior Jug Band, and my brother Dan and I were on that record. And then by the time the second record came out, it was just the Junior Jug Band, and it was a 4-piece band, and the 4 of us were in that band together. Because we used to go to the shows, and we'd get up for the last 3 songs, Dan and I. The other thing is, I was absolutely obsessed with backstage areas, green rooms, dressing rooms. Like, that was so much fun for us. So we'd go to the show, we'd run around backstage and go sit in front of the lights, like the sort of Broadway-style lights, and, go to the green room and eat all the snacks, and we just love to explore all that stuff. And so then we'd get on stage for the last 3 songs, and that turned out to be always the most kind of popular part of the show, because it's fun to see little kids.
No big deal.
Yeah, no big deal. And so then I always thought that it was my dad and Ken's idea to like have us just be on more and more until we were finally just on the whole show, and then we had a touring act. But my uncle recently told me that it was my idea. He's like, as soon as Jenny realized she wanted to do it, well, that was that. And so then you guys were just in the band. And then I really felt like I owed my brother an apology.
How old were you around this time? Like what era?
That would have been like Yeah, like he would have been 7 and I was 9, I think, around then.
Whoa.
Yeah.
And were you like listening to music and thinking about being a musician, or were you just sort of, this was just your existence?
Yeah, well, we did listen to a lot of like we loved music, but music was on all the time at home, just always on, you know. And you know, people were coming over to rehearse for shows because my dad and his wife, my stepmom, Caitlin Hanford, they were in a band playing country music too. So, you know, like just tons of people, the who's who of the Canadian folk music world. I could name some names, but they might not be somebody you recognize. But, you know, lots of people coming through, playing music. Every party would be people playing music. But then Dan and I would really obsess about certain music too. And like, you know, those were the days of like the big earphones, plug into the family sound system. That was the only way you could really listen to music on your own. So we loved like, we loved the Beatles, we loved the Beach Boys, we loved the Who. Boris the Spider was one of our obsessive, you know, so, and the Coasters, we went kind of crazy for the Coasters. So we did love music ourselves, but we were really just surrounded by it. I didn't start playing an instrument till I got a bass amp for Christmas, and then for my birthday in January, I got a bass, and I was like, are you trying to tell me you want me to play bass in the band? But then once I started playing, it came almost like second nature to me because I'd seen it happen so much around me, and I'm the kind of person who learns from watching. So I think you could almost compare it to growing up in a family with any other skill. Like you just speak that language, you understand what people are talking about. The facility is just there in a different way.
Gotcha. And was this all in Toronto?
All in Toronto, yep. Grew up on Marion Street, Roncesvalles. Went to Howard Park. I was in the second year of French immersion.
Okay.
Yeah, that was pretty good. And then went to Runnymede, Humberside.
And then how did you transition from junior jug band to the first band you were in, Heartbreak Hill? Yeah. Which out of all your records, that's the one I've listened to the least. So I don't know any of that story. Like how did that? And what was the timeline too? So
Heartbreak Hill. So I went to so after I was still playing in the. There was a slightly awkward phase of being in the junior jug band when we were still playing shows, but we'd show up at the the junior high to play for grades 7 and 8s, and we were basically the same age as the kids, and that was pretty cringy. You know, that would definitely be like, you know, we're like playing washtub bass and singing Turkey in the Straw, and like, the kids are like, what is happening? And Dan and I were like, oh my God, this is bad. But then we kind of got through that phase, and then when I went off to university in Montreal, I took the train home to Toronto twice a month to play junior jug band gigs. Because the money was so good.
Jug money.
Seriously, I had so much more money than any of that jug band music money was big in those days. So then that's kind of what I was doing, and I took anthropology in university. Didn't think I would pursue music really professionally outside of just doing it, you know, with the family band. And then I was kind of thinking, once I'm done with that, I'll be done. I guess I did a Joni Mitchell tribute record, which was called Back to the Garden. Somebody asked me to sing on that. Okay. And it was the same people who produced the one that was Kick at the Darkness, which was the Bare Naked Ladies did that Lovers in a Dangerous Time. Yeah. Same like series. Okay. And I guess that led to some people hearing me, and then I got some interest, people asking me, would you want to be interested in coming back to Toronto and maybe working on making a record? Mm-hmm. And I had done 2 years of a 4-year anthropology degree, and I was like, I mean, yeah, probably. So that's what I did. So I came back to Toronto, and that's when I started hanging out with the people that I eventually started playing bluegrass music with. I didn't end up making a record with that other company that asked me to come back, so that was in the 90s, and then so we got super immersed that's really when we did our like serious 10,000 hours of like playing pickin' and just like jamming constantly, was in the mid 90s. Mm-hmm. And then we formed a band of probably around 96, 97. Made our one record in 98, got nominated for a Juno. First bluegrass band, Canadian bluegrass band to be nominated for it, because they didn't have a bluegrass category. We were nominated in alt something or other, I forget now, a folk category. So it was super exciting. And then we just made that one record, and we played for a few years, did a lot of festivals and stuff, and then had a disastrous breakup.
Oh, I mean, that sounds interesting. I was going to ask about the Juno nomination, but the disastrous breakup sounds interesting. Do you still know these people or no?
I
They're
know.
right?
I know I know 2 out of the other 3 people still.
Okay, that's a good percentage. So then, yeah, that first Juno nomination, was that out of nowhere? Like for you, was that crazy or?
Oh, but I had already been nominated with the Junior Jug Band. We got nominated for a Juno when I was 14.
So old news.
So yeah, but it was the coolest. I got to go. So they only gave us 2 tickets to the Junos. So is that right? So I think my dad and I got to go. Or like everybody said, you guys go. I forget why that happened. But when we were there, of course, when you're nominated, you sit up really up close. And I actually think it was at the Glenn Gould studio, actually. But
In here, this building?
I think so, yeah. Anyhow, it was Gordon Lightfoot was getting the Lifetime Achievement Award, and Bob Dylan gave it to him. So I got to sit like this far from Bob Dylan while he told this whole speech about that. So that was the highlight. That was cool. Yeah,
That's
but no,
crazy if it happened to down the hall.
I think it was just down the hall. Yeah.
Wild.
But then, yeah, Heartbreak Hill getting nominated was super, super cool because, you know, I mean, it's like awards, you can think what you want about them, but these awards, the ones that aren't the big, like they only show 8 or 10 awards on the big broadcast. And those are basically sales-based, which is totally legit, but it's just a different thing. And all the other awards are basically you submit your work, and there's a whole committee of people who are in your area of music, and they listen to everything, and they make a short list, and then they make a shorter list, and then they make the list of the nominees, and then they decide if you win. That's what I've always taken from it is like of all the records that were made in Canada this year in the kind of music I play, my peers decided mine was the best, which is like it's super cool. So that's how I look at it. So it was totally mind-blowing and also really made us feel like we were welcome and legit, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's amazing. And I didn't know that was the difference between what you see on broadcast versus all the other ones that happen behind the scenes. And what was just like Toronto's music scene like in the 90s? I was so, like I didn't come into listening to your stuff probably to like mid-2000s. I was so into hip-hop. I just couldn't get out of it. But like for you, and bringing bluegrass and that sound here, what was that like mid-90s and onward? So
yeah, I mean, we got really, so there was this whole movement of bluegrass in the States that it was kind of like the new grass, people would call it. It was like this, basically a third generation of people playing bluegrass. And now it's like Billy Strings and Sierra Hall and all these super cool people. It's changing again and again, which is so great because you want it to be more inclusive, and it really, really is now, and I'm super excited about it. But we got into it when the technique was getting so good and people were playing so fast. It was almost like punk rock, if you want to believe that. If you go back and listen to like Bela Fleck and Tony Rice and like Sam Bush and those guys playing in that era, that's who we loved and emulated. So we played pretty intense bluegrass. Like we were not loping along, and you know, we had some, and we really loved the High Lonesome sound. We loved the Stanley Brothers. We didn't really play a lot of Bill Monroe stuff. So we had a certain thing that really worked for an urban crowd. So we got a gig at the Silver Dollar Room, and we played the Silver Dollar Wednesday. We called it High Lonesome Wednesday, and that show, I think they did 23 years of that show. But Heartbreak Hill, like the show was going okay, but then the guy who was the booker there came to me and said, would you guys, we were just starting off as Heartbreak Hill, we'd probably played like 4 shows. He said, would you guys wanna, and that's another thing, you get a little cred because you've been around even though you haven't been doing your own thing. You know, he was willing to take a chance on us, you know, holding this night. So would you want to take over the Wednesdays? And so we did, which was, again, it's kind of like, not to compare myself to the Beatles, I'm only saying that you get to spend all that time playing live, and that's how you get good. Like, that's how you get to a certain, like, you know, pinnacle of technique and everything. And we also really deliberately made a choice not to dress like a bluegrass band. We just wore our regular, what in the 90s we considered pretty cool clothes.
Sure.
And
I watched Friends.
What's that?
I watched Friends.
Yeah, you watched Friends. Yeah, exactly. and so I think we were quite palatable, and people were attracted to us, especially. And we played at the Silver Dollars right by U of T, so tons of it started to become really popular with all these university students. So we had this huge crowd, young crowd, and so those people who are watching us, like I know 3 or 4 different bands who got inspired, or at least partially, to start playing from those gigs, and who I hire now, and I, get them to teach at my camps, and yeah, it's super cool.
Amazing.
Because in those days, you had to go to like the Legion in Mississauga if you wanted to see bluegrass, and we did.
Yeah, but you brought it downtown, which is pretty cool. And then you made your first record, which was You Wanted Juno. And what was that transition, doing the group thing to your own thing? I'm guessing you wrote all the music?
Yeah, I didn't write all the music for Heartbreak Hill, but I did write a lot. I was in a pretty prolific time, and I was writing a lot of songs, and a lot of them weren't going to necessarily work for the bluegrass band. So I did end up having a bunch of songs, and I really wanted to make a record. I wasn't necessarily convinced, like, I'm going to make a record, that'll be the end of Heartbreak Hill, but it kind of ended up being that way, timing-wise. So I made that record, and it's definitely like Americana. Like, the Americana was a term that was kind of new at that time, and which worked out great for me because I fit right into that. I could actually say, I mean, it's a weird one to be a Canadian and call yourself Americana, but that's what it was, and it was kind of just, it was like No Depression magazine, all that stuff, and they started the Americana Music Festival and awards, so there was a lot of places for me to exist, which was great, because I was like a songwriter who was moody, but played like kind of twangy, and and I played, when we still played really darn fast on that record.
Right. Yeah.
I
looking
almost
back,
dropped an F-bomb right there.
You're allowed to.
Am I?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Fuck yeah.
But then so then I couldn't. But then I nominated for a Juno and then won. And you know who gave me my Juno?
No.
In Sync.
Actually.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
It was insane. Yeah, it was insane.
Yeah, I had no idea. And then was that a whole new level compared to your previous two nominations, or was it felt like a gradual thing?
The weird thing is, I kind of had this feeling I was going to win it. Like, we were at the party, and we were talking to Martin Tielli and having a chat, and I was like, I think we should get in there, because it was before they used to do a separate night for the Saturday and Sunday. They do like a gala now, and then the Sunday night awards. They used to just run through like all the categories, and then they'd stop, and then they'd do the show. So if you missed it, you missed it, you know what I mean? So I was like, I think we should get in there. And literally Joey and I were walking in, and they started announcing, and it was at Cops Coliseum, so it was huge. Started announcing my award, and I was like, they're going to say my name. I just kind of had this feeling, and I started dropping my jacket in my purse, and Joey's picking it up behind me. So I didn't even sit in my seat. I just walked right up on stage. I was like, hello, Justin Timberlake. Thank you so much, and got my award.
That is outstanding.
Which was kind of great, because I didn't have time to think about it,
Right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah. And then when you look back on that album, it's like, how does it sit for you these days? You ever listen to
now
it?
I really like it. Yeah, like there's usually about a 10 to 12 to 15 to 20 year period where you're like a little eye-rolly about your own music. You're lucky if you can go back and listen to a record 10 years later and actually really appreciate it and love it. So far, so good. All of them go back and I go, oh, that's actually pretty good, but not right away.
Right.
Right away, you're obsessed and you love it so much. It's the best thing that anyone's ever done. Hopefully, that's how you feel. You should feel that way if you're making art. But then it's a little cringy after for some reason. After you tour it, after you tour those songs, then you're kind of just maybe meant to just give it a little rest for a while. I don't know. Yeah.
And then second album was repeat or different in any way?
What do you mean?
Like, was it, you'd done it, you'd accomplished it, and then did you sort of fall back in your same routine, or did you approach it with some new eyes or something?
Oh, to make the second record?
Yeah.
So the second record, the first record I produced myself. And then the second record, I had been talking to someone who had a band called Zubat and Dawson. His name was Steve Dawson, and I was a huge fan. I would go see them play everywhere. They were playing, anytime they came to Toronto. I'm sure they were very confused about our relationship because I was at every show and I'd be like, you guys can crash at our place. And they were like, what's happening? But anyway, I was just a super fan. And I think we were at a festival in the Yukon, and Steve and I were chatting, and he said, if you're thinking about making another record, maybe I should produce it. And I was like, oh my God, that'd be great, because I loved his stuff he'd done with, it was all instrumental, the stuff he did with Jesse Zubat. But anyway, so that's what we did. So we went and ended up making that record together. But the crazy thing is, I had a baby 6 weeks before we recorded that record.
Whoa.
And I was like, because I'd never had a baby before, but I'd made records before. I was like, how hard can having a baby be? Anyway, so I just didn't know enough to think that was a crazy idea. So we just did it. And it was Hopetown.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The song, well, do you have any songs that can make you cry when you hear them?
My own songs?
No, just in general.
Songs that make me cry.
Or no, that's not a
yeah,
thing
no,
for
I
you.
have tons of them. I just can't access any of them right at
Yeah,
this moment.
I've got a couple.
No, songs, I cry at songs like at the drop of a hat.
Burning of Atlanta can make me, they'll well up and I can pull them back or I can let them go. But,
Right.
And it's funny, that one for me is less, sometimes it's like the lyrics, but that one's more sonically. It gets me. I don't know why.
That's nice.
Yeah, I don't know why. There's a lot of songs post-kids where I'm an easy cry.
I'm an easy crier too. Yeah, I like that a lot. So music can really make me cry. In fact, being on stage at folk festivals where you have to like play with other artists, like they
Harmonize
mash you up. If someone starts singing a really emotional song, I've been known to just completely lose it. And then it's just, I guess it's charming to some degree, but it's also embarrassing and a bit unprofessional. And then I have to get up and sing, and I'm like, anyway, but I'm very moved by music, especially lyrics. Yeah.
Okay, speaking of lyrics, the title of this lesson or this session was "How do you write a song?" So, and you teach classes and courses on this. So, how is that something you can strip down? How do you write a song? Either you specifically, or how do you, in general, write a song?
Yeah, okay. So first of all, it's a kind of topic like anything artistic, I think, that you can go on and get into as much detail, and you can stretch out and dig in. But there's also you kind of can explain it quickly too, because it is kind of simple, and it sounds a bit trite, I guess, but like you have to really want to do it, which I know sounds like, yeah, obviously I want to be a songwriter, but it's got to be the kind of thing, or it doesn't have to be, but it's really great if it's the kind of thing where you just can't leave it alone. So basically what the best case scenario is, you're open to things you hear, you're open to musical ideas, you're open to a little riff that pops in your head, and you pay attention to it. And that's really where the best ideas come from. So Halls of Folsom, a song on that same record you're talking about, like, and listening to tons of music is super important. And you can tell, if you pay attention, to people who are songwriters who at some point stopped listening to other people's music.
Interesting.
If you really pay attention. And you're like, what happened there? It got weird after the third record. And you're like, oh, because they don't listen to music or go see shows, and they don't participate anymore in the same way. And sometimes that can turn out some cool stuff, like really like maybe, like an artistic project that's really specific. But generally, I find the input is super important for the output. Anyway, that song was just this riff that was going around in my head. It was like, I'm walking, da 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 da, da 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 da. And I was like, okay, that's there. And I'm like, but the words that were going with it were, I'm walking halls of Folsom every day now in my mind. And I was like, Jenny, obviously you're not going to write a country song about Folsom Prison. Like, who in the world would do that, especially someone from Toronto? But I could not let it go. And so then that's another thing. You just have to let that happen. And you know what? If you write that song and decide to never do anything with it, well, whatever. But if you squash it down and you ignore it and say, you're a bad idea and I don't like this idea, then you're stopping the flow, right? So that's kind of just like a real overall, like, be open, pay attention, take tons of notes. If you think you're going to remember it, you will not remember it, especially if it's melody. Melody is the most fleeting part of any song. So you can have the chord progression, you can have the words, and you can play it 40 times, and you're like, I got it. If you don't record it, you're going to forget. Or if you write music, you can write it out. But now, so we're also lucky because we walk around with a voice memo on our phones, so we can just record it. Because the littlest tiny difference, because if you think of it, there's only so many notes in the scale, and every song that we've ever heard, that's the only notes they have at their fingertips are those notes. So a tiny difference, like, if you go down a half like a half step or a semitone, or if you just decided that you're going to do something different slightly in the beat, that's what's going to make your song cool, and that's what made you like it in the first place. That's 101.
What do your voice notes look like? Is it all? What do your voice notes on your app look like? Is it a whole bunch of?
Oh yeah, they're crazy. Yeah, no, they're on and on. Really, they are. And also found sound. Like if I hear something cool, you know, like if there's something happening in the street, like in Toronto, that's making a sound that's a cool beat, or like a bird is singing or whatever. I record a lot of that stuff too. Use it sometimes on recordings, other times just for inspiration.
Right.
Yeah.
So do a lot of your songs start from a melody or a sentence or a line, and then you build outwards?
Yeah, mostly it comes from a little, like a melody that I will just kind of pop in my head, or I'll pick up the guitar, which I don't do as much anymore. I used to, like I write differently for sure now than I used to. Right now, what I'm doing mostly is I have working with Julian Brown, and Julian Brown will send me something that's like, you know, it's like and then I'm like, oh yeah, okay, cool, I hear that, and I'm like, ooh, I have an idea for a story, and then I put words to it, and then we finish it together, and that's really working for me, because I love puzzles, and to me that feels like solving a puzzle, you know? So that's what I'm doing now. I think partly because I kind of exhausted that other part of my type of songwriting for a while, and maybe I'll go back to it later, which is the kind where you just sit down with your guitar and you start messing around and something comes into your mind. Like, you know, if you've ever seen Bob Dylan's interview where he talks about his early work, and he's like, I don't even know how I wrote those songs. And again, I'm not comparing myself to him, but what he said that really resonated with me was, you know, the interviewer, 60 Minutes, said, could you do it now? And he just thought about it, and he goes, no, I can do a lot of other things, but not that. So it's okay if that, you know, you don't keep producing the same art your whole life. I mean, actually, that's probably better if you don't keep producing the same art your whole life with the same technique in the same way.
Do you use your songwriting skills in other areas of life, like in life or in business, or, I don't know, writing emails or whatever it is?
Yeah. Writing, all of that stuff probably, but like, yeah, no, for sure, like writing, well, because I own a business that's a music camp for adults, right? So I send out a lot of like notes to these adults who are coming to camp, which is, you know, scary thing to maybe do as an adult. You're putting yourself out there. It's like, you know, all people you don't know, are you good enough to be there? Are you the right fit? Is it going to be fun, scary? What's it going to be like? So when I craft all the notes and the emails and the texts and the posts and everything for that, with help, but I have to strike a certain, either it's a serious one, or it's one that's super fun, or it's charming, or it's this, or it's that. And so what I do in both cases, songwriting and any other writing I do, is I edit and edit and edit. And I go through and I take that out and I say, well, that's not necessary. And I say, this word doesn't make any sense in there. You know, in some ways you could say, like, okay, so the other day I made a playlist with my friend Brian. I was like, I want to make a playlist that is like prog for people who don't like prog. So it's like a gateway prog playlist. So we called it Bury Your Free Prog. And, you know, so we're just making a playlist for fun. Well, we had like 2 iPads out, a laptop, 2 phones. I had my, you know, clipboard out. We're going through people talking about prog, writing down, no, not that one, this one, you know, researching it. And I was like, this is so crazy that we're spending this much time and energy and focus and taking it so seriously, but having so much fun doing that, because I find for myself, when I take things seriously, I have more fun, you know? Like, I have fun when I'm just being goofy too, but like, I love to get into a project and really, you know, get into it. And kind of realized in that moment, I was like, this is what art is. You're doing something that isn't necessarily serious, but you're taking it really seriously, you know? Mm. And so I do that with writing and songwriting, so those skills totally transfer.
Gotcha.
For sure.
For your camps, are they open? Can people sign up? Or do they sell out every year, though, I think? Or?
They do, but we have new people every year. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, they're small. We do 2. They each have 50 campers.
Okay.
They're bluegrass-based. We have a songwriting thread. So we do one in July and one in November. And the one in November, we have one. It's on Wolf Island at the Hotel Wolf Island, which our friend Chris Brown just bought. So now it's like it's still a hotel and a restaurant, but it's also an art space, which is really great, and it really works with what we're doing. So this will be our 3rd or 4th camp we've done there. So we have one spot for a private room with a shared bathroom, which is like in a suite, and then we have one shared room. So that's got to be for the real bold adult camper who can come and share a room with a stranger and learn how to play banjo.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. And when is the summer one? When do you usually open that up?
Yeah, that'll open up at Christmas.
Like people can sign up.
They
at
can
Christmas?
sign up at Christmas.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
so hit me up if you're interested. Tough question. What are you listening to these days? You stay listening because that was your advice.
Oh yeah, no. Well, also I have 2 daughters, 21 and 17, who both love music, which is I really just go out and get yourself a couple of kids and who love music, and they'll keep you listening to new music, or at least they'll help you point you in the right direction.
Yeah.
Let's see, Waxahachie. Been listening to lots of Waxahachie this summer.
Listened to them based on Spotify. Never knew how to pronounce it.
Yeah, Waxahachie. It's a kind of a she. I think just it's a yeah. What else? Chapel Roan. Pretty down with Chapel Roan right now. What else am I listening to? Well, Lila's band Meteor Heist does make its appearance.
Yeah, so your daughter, I told you this, her daughter has a band. I was wearing her shirt here a couple weeks ago, and someone was like, cool shirt. I was like, yeah, it's my friend's band. And then I realized, no, it's my friend's daughter's band.
She's also your friend.
I don't have her phone number. But she was playing, where did she play? Monarch Tavern? That was pretty cool.
Is that when you went to see her?
I saw her at Monarch Tavern.
Yeah, they're playing at Supermarket this week, I think.
Okay, this weekend.
This week or sometime soon.
Oh
yeah,
my God!
I can't
So
keep,
now you're competing.
I can't keep up.
Your daughter's playing. I'm guessing your brother's playing every night.
Oh, my brother
somewhere.
Jesse plays nonstop all over Queen Street and elsewhere. Yeah, he's
Cameron out, whatever.
Yeah.
And then you're playing Sunday night.
This week I'm playing. Well, we're playing so. I guess it's my age, but all my friends are buying motels and hotels right now. So my friend Una bought the Motel Chelsea, which is near Wakefield, Quebec, near Ottawa. We're playing there Friday with the Hootenanny Review, which is Carolyn Mark, Luther Wright, Susie Ungerleider, a bunch of us, Americana artists, as they used to call us. And then Hotel Wolf Island on Saturday, and then Old Church Theatre in Trenton on Sunday. And then I'm done, and then I just have to do that and run my camp November 1st to 3rd, and then I get to take like 2 weeks off.
So good. Hopefully I'll go see your daughter.
Yeah.
Yeah, last time I saw her at Monarch, and fun fact about that you'll like, Monarch, first place that my dad bought a beer.
Oh, really? The Monarch Tavern?
Like 50 years ago.
I used to live right on Gore Street there, Clinton and Gore. So Clinton and College, there's a little dead-end street right just north of the Monarch Tavern. When I was a kid, I lived there. Like, my mom always lived downtown, and my dad lived on Marion Street. And we lived at Clinton and Gore when Bill Clinton and Al Gore were in office.
Good time.
Yeah, fun fact.
Oh, my gosh. Well, that's all I have. Does anyone have any questions before we wrap up on songwriting in general? John, yeah, man.
Mm-hmm.
Just yell it, yeah.
You know how as a musician you sort of go through stages of your level or your ability, like obviously the first thing is being able to play your instrument, and then it's like, okay, now I'm comfortable writing songs. What was that like for you? What was your progression as a musician where you noticed you were hitting new milestones, and how do you keep seeking out those milestones, or what is the next thing?
Right. So the question is like, what are the milestones and how do you keep improving, basically, right? And noticing those milestones as you go along. So it's weird because I started playing music so young, but I actually didn't start playing guitar till I was like 23 or 22 or something like that. So I'm a very good rhythm guitar player, but I don't play solos and I don't know all the really intense jazz chords or anything like that. So I'm like a capo up and down the neck type of person. I can finger pick and stuff like that. But the funny thing is, to me, it was more about like the confidence. Once the confidence started to show up, and it has a lot to do with performance too. So I don't know how to answer it without performance being involved in the mix, because that's always been my experience as is a performance-based thing. So I'm not worried about how I'm sounding when I'm playing by myself, or even really when I'm sort of playing with other fellow musicians in a jam. I got to be a really good bass player. Actually, I played bass in that bluegrass band, and I did really improve, and I could tell that. But that also came through playing live a lot. But I found for me, like, the confidence levels would jump as soon as you don't die every time you go on stage. Like, you're like, I'm definitely gonna probably just die. Like, I'm just gonna drop dead, and that's gonna be the end of my life, but I'm still gonna do it anyway, which is crazy. It's why musicians are actually sometimes the coolest people you'll hang out with, because they put themselves out in danger constantly in the most embarrassing potential thing that could happen to them. And then when they don't have that happen, that's when your confidence starts to build. So I don't know if I can answer your question in terms of skills about playing the instrument, but I can definitely relate to that in terms of having the confidence to take it to the next level. Like, it took me forever to sing on stage with handheld mic, because I always had an instrument in front of me, and I felt kind of like weird, like, what do I do with my body when I'm not playing guitar? And once I just did that a few times, I was like, oh, I see, I can do it, and nobody booed me, and people stayed, and so that's one way I can answer that. But I will tell you that, like, my husband Joey, my brother Dan, like, all these musicians I play with who are like the top of the top guys, session people, play with everybody. They, like, Joey practices every day for an hour and a half, and he puts the metronome on. And, so he thinks he's got tons of, I think it's like, the better you get, the more you realize you don't know, which is could be a little daunting idea, but also is super exciting, because it's a lifelong learning kind of process. And if that didn't answer your question, okay, cool.
If anyone could think of other questions, I'll quickly, I can connect that to our universe, because I had similar experience presenting. We do so much presenting to clients. And once I sort of got some confidence there of like, oh yeah, I'm not gonna die. A different experience that I was like, gave me confidence outside of those presentations as well. That's so interesting.
Like confidence in your everyday life.
Totally, in my craft of like coming up with ideas here.
And it translates.
Totally.
Yeah, for sure.
It's interesting. Anyone else? Questions? Yes.
Well, so so talking about writer's block, and so one thing at camp we do, and so we've at a full songwriters camp, we'll do a lot of exercises that are deliberately meant to make you really go outside of your comfort zone. So, for instance, might say, I might take a book and get somebody to open it to a page and point to a word, and then do that 3 times and find 3 words, and then we've got these 3 random words out of a novel, and then we choose maybe we choose 3 chords, and we say, okay, now everybody has to go and write the worst, corniest song, the most obvious thing you can do. You've got 1 hour, we'll meet back here, we're all going to play what we've got, whether you've got a little something, or you did a whole song, or you've got a bridge, or you got a chorus, and then that is the thing. So you're like, instead of fighting yourself, instead of being like, no, that's not good enough, it's not good enough, you're like leaning into, it's terrible, great, I'm completing the assignment, so it's like switching the narrative, and then that just kind of shakes loose the cobwebs and the blocks and starts to get you, so we do tons of stuff like that. So exercises that are just meant to get you out, like, because writer's block is really probably just habits. Your habits are just too rigid, and you need to do something else. Like, you need to write an a cappella song. You need to try and write an instrumental. You need to, write something in a genre that you normally never do. Try writing with someone else. Ask someone who's a good musician to write you a little melody, and you just try and write the words to it, or vice versa. So all those kind of things. But you also, once you've been writing for a long time, when you're first starting, it's a bit of a different story, but once you have enough experience to know that you are eventually going to write another song, it's also okay to just like kind of give yourself a break and be like, I'm in a bit of an input stage right now. I'm just going to go see a lot of music. I'm going to take a lot of walks. I'm not going to beat myself up, because I don't know, I'm sure everybody knows this about creativity, even just life in general. When you force it, it's like you could take like 3 hours to write a little email, where as if, the next day you've had a great morning, you're having your second coffee, and you're like, oh, I know, and you just write that thing. You let your subconscious kind of work on it, and you don't push yourself when you're not feeling it. Because a lot of the times when you're not feeling it, it might not end up being your favorite stuff. That being said, you might write a little line, you might write 40 lines, and one of them ends up being something cool, and that ends up being the idea for a whole other song. So those are just a few tricks. Yeah. Wonderful. In-sync song, I don't even know. I don't think
My son is obsessed with I Want It That Way. Tell me why.
I want to
He's
know what
5.
that song means, but I don't want to talk about that right now. I always thought it sounded a little dirty.
I haven't analyzed, but my son
But
knows
what's the
every word.
one? There's one that has like, oh God, I should know, but it just has like 3 syllables.
Backstreet Boys. I think I got it wrong.
Yeah, Backstreet Boys. But NSYNC, there's one that's just, yeah, what is it? Bye, bye, bye. That's the one. That's definitely the one, because that would translate the best. You could stop playing all the instruments. You could slap that bass, and then you could all say bye, 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 and then start playing again. There you go.
Time for a reunion?
Time for a reunion, yes. Yeah, jug band reunion. Love it.
Great question. Anyone else before we wrap it up? Okay, well, thanks, Jenny, so much.
Thank you,
Such
everybody.
A treat. I learned a lot. We have next month, I think we got 2 more of these lined up. Next month, we're going to interview a professional skateboarder who's now a YouTuber, and then Dario's going to do a special episode with a tattoo artist in December, January, and those will be in your calendars. And if there's someone else you want to interview or you want to be involved, let me know. Just hit me up. Thanks again, guys. See ya.